And we're live. Hi guys, I'm Mike. This is F1 Fanatics and welcome to the F1 weekly news show where we round up the latest news and stories from the world of F1. I know technically I said that it would only be live streams during the kind of race weekends because it was easier to fit it in after FP1, but it kind of makes sense. I quite like having these kind of live stream chats with people, and it means that we can talk about the latest stories in F1. As you can tell, wearing a Ferrari top today, because quite a lot of the news actually is revolving around Ferrari. We will get into those kind of headlines as well as kind of looking ahead. I think lots of rumours about track circuits and which ones will be on the calendar as well. So yeah, we'll certainly do that. Give me 1 minute while I just tweet about us going live, and then we will jump straight into the news stories. I hope you're well today. So let me just go from there. How are we all coping without Formula One this weekend? It feels very weird having 3 back-to-back weekends and then no races this weekend. It kind of goes, shouldn't there be something this weekend? I guess, isn't there MotoGP this weekend? Marc Marquez, I suppose, is probably one story, not F1 related, but how the hell he's riding this weekend after breaking his arm last week. That was crazy. Getting the link. JB, hi JB. Do you believe there will be a race in Vietnam or Malaysia this season? It sucks without F1. Lol. Yeah, well, we'll get on to that. Go for that. Dario Nessi, what exactly has changed in Ferrari? Right, well, we'll talk about that and get in discussions as then. I'm being very slow on terms of tweeting this out, and then we'll go from there. Perfect. Got the link here. Right. Okay. Well, Dario, JB, as you're in chat, what one would you like me to discuss first? Would you like me to discuss Ferrari first, or would you like me to discuss the tracks first, as these are the kind of both main news stories from this recent week in Formula One? I'll leave that in chat. If I'll give you 30 seconds, and if not, I'll just jump in and go straight in with Ferrari on that front. But yeah, it really does kind of feel weird. Tracks, in my opinion, tracks. Haley's gone tracks. Okay, we'll start off with tracks. JB, you get the gun jumping on this one. So obviously, we know with the F1 2020 calendar that it kind of seems like every couple of weeks, as the kind of virus develops, we get some new stories about what tracks can't we go to. We get some new stories about tracks going through. Hey, Katie, thanks for joining us in chat. So obviously breaking news this morning actually is that we won't be going to the Americas. So we won't be having a COTA, we won't have a Montreal, Mexico, Brazil, all of those tracks, they're out the window for this year. And in fairness, with how COVID-19 is in those countries, it really isn't a surprise that we won't be going there, because obviously F1 are trying to keep everything contained. And I know we've had a few spikes in recent weeks around Europe, but the situation generally as a whole, so to speak, goes from there. That isn't official though, is it? Although I'm not surprised if that's the case. I think it was reported. I saw it on BBC News this morning. I kind of saw the headline, so I can check if it's official from there. But it feels like that is the case. And I think also it rules out Canada, and I think Canada was more because of the time of year that it was going there as well. But yeah, I just, by all the rumours of tracks that we're having, it kind of feels like it would be safer not to try and travel across big continents as we go. So I imagine we're going to go in Europe and then into the Middle East. And so obviously Vietnam and Malaysia, they are a little bit further into Asia. I would be surprised if we went that far east this season. I think we will pretty much the further, although, yeah, Sepang is being rumoured. So it definitely would be interesting on that front. But tracks that look like they will be kind of rumoured to be confirmed is Nürburgring. Hockenheim, I think, was ruled out either yesterday or this morning, although we did that track comparison video of Hockenheim and Sepang. Realistically, maybe we should have done Nürburgring and Hocken and Sepang, because, yeah, that seems the one that we're kind of more likely on that front. But, yes, Sepang and, Sepang looks like it might be in there. Nürburgring, Portimao or the Algarve in Portugal, and also Imola looks like they will be announced as well. So I imagine that the next triple header after, to go along with Sochi, there will be Imola, Portimao and Algarve, and the Nürburgring. And I actually think, having watched DTM there over the past couple of years, I think the Nürburgring actually would be quite a good track for F1. I think turn 1 would be a great overtaking zone. Go from there. It's one of those kind of more classic older tracks where the overtaking's limit, but I do think it's a wider and probably would allow for more exciting racing than Hockenheim without the rain. Obviously, Hockenheim is great with the rain. Dario, obviously, I'll get round to the Ferrari thing. It was relation to the changes inside the team. Okay. I'll go from there. China sounds like as though it's going to be cancelled. Yeah, Sepang, I just think, I suppose it's fair enough east. The only reason they didn't go to Singapore this year is because the logistics of setting up a street circuit are incredibly difficult. And I don't think Malaysia would be too out of the question. And I think they will be super keen to get Vietnam on the calendar, just because they've invested a lot in that track. Well, the people who've made the Vietnam track, and for it not to get a race this year, I think it would be a pretty difficult one for them to go from there. From what I saw, races at Imola, Nürburgring and Portimao won't be a triple header. It looks as though they will have a 1 week gap between them. Okay, that's not too bad. I mean, that's probably quite good for the teams. I know, obviously, hearing Martin Brundle talk about it on Sky Sports, he was basically saying that it sounds like we're going to have F1 up until Christmas, which it could be an early Christmas present, I suppose, for you guys considering on that front. But yeah, so having week gaps between them seems a little bit more understandable. Hey, Fergus, thanks for joining in chat. Just had an interview with Ollie Caldwell. Hope that went well. That would be very cool. Oh, very nice. Frederick Vesti would be a great interview to have. Very good drivers for good views. Ollie is a very nice guy. Great. Excellent for that. Go and check out the Understeer podcast as well. Great channel just coming out. Fergus has massively been supportive of our channel. So yeah, please go and check out his podcast as well. He's been getting some brilliant guests on there recently. Liam Talks F1. Hi, Mike. Good to see you. I'm hoping Imola and Nürburgring are on the F1 calendar. Yeah, I think I would prefer to see the Nürburgring over Hockenheim in return. And like I said, Hockenheim, it looks like is out of the running for any sort of track. Singapore said that they would only go ahead if they could have fans and it go ahead on the original date. So straight away, it would have been difficult to go to Singapore. Yeah, but I also think because of street circuits being ruled out in their way, the logistics of building a street circuit made things very difficult. Oh, nice. Very good, Liam. Glad you started that on there. Yes, the Nürburgring rush scene is great in terms of that. It's a classic track. Obviously, it's not like the Nordschleife, which is a proper kind of chaotic track and what is it described as a death trap? But yeah, but I think the last time that F1 was at the Nürburgring in kind of wet conditions, I think it was quite a chaotic race. I think turn 1 from memory had a lot of people spinning off in the rain. It certainly was crazy. And I think actually it might have been, it was an orange team. Would it have been Arrows, or would Arrows have been gone by that point? I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Arrows would have been gone by that point because it was in 2008. So my mind's going on and trying to think about what the orange team, maybe it was Super Guri. I think about that time that might have come in there. The Green Hell, Jackie Stewart, absolutely. Do you think that some of these tracks that are joining the calendar, Mugello, Portimao, etc., last minute will end up joining the calendar as a long-term fixture? Mugello, I'm not sure on. I think we're really going to see, I think it's a real technically difficult track for the drivers, but it'd be interesting to see how they view it as a long-term future in F1. Portimao, definitely. I can definitely see the Algarve being a more potential return to Canada, because we haven't had a Portuguese Grand Prix since Estoril, and obviously that was deemed unsafe, I think, back in 1995. It was in the 1990s. I'm pretty sure that it was ruled out on that front. But yeah, this was obviously a purpose-built track. I think they've had FIA F3 championships there. It's definitely for 2022. I think it's going to be an interesting one. So yeah, I think that one definitely could. And Sepang, if Sepang wants it and does come back from these sorts of tracks, I can definitely see Malaysia going up, because in any circumstances, Malaysia is one of the better Tilke tracks and definitely would come out on that front. We want Portugal to have an F1 race. I think there have been some great races at Portugal, and 1985, Senna comes to mind. 1984 season finale with Niki Lauda winning his championship comes to mind as well. So I think there's definitely room for Portugal to have some F1s. What do you think is the biggest loss from the F1 calendar? In my opinion, Interlagos. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's any doubt. I think Interlagos definitely is the biggest loss to the F1 calendar, just because of how passionate Brazil is. I think the biggest loss to the F1 calendar would probably be Mexico for Sergio Perez, because it looks like, you know, that might have been a real possibility for a podium in his home Grand Prix. And with how talks are developing at Aston Martin, you know, it might be his last chance to get that type of possibility. Sepang belongs in F1. Well, actually, it was Sepang who withdrew from the F1 calendar. So I think F1 always wanted Sepang to stay on it. But yeah, Sepang pulled out. I don't think attendance figures were great. I think Malaysia's circuit wasn't necessarily in the best accessible option to get to the track. Personally, I thought Sochi triple. Oh, Fergus, you are such a troll in the comments sometimes. Sepang would have been great to have back in the Canada. I hated it on the game, but was great for racing. Yeah, absolutely. I think those long back straights that are quite similar to China are definitely one from there. But I think we'll round off. We can come back to the tracks. I think we've mainly covered the track stories on that front. We'll now talk about Ferrari, because I know Dario's interested on that. So obviously, a few things with Ferrari. I suppose I think this weekend was the first time that Matteo Binotto admitted that the rule changes or the new technical kind of regulations implemented by the FIA on the engines from the back end of last year is what has affected Ferrari's engine performance. What I want to clear up on that one, I don't think Ferrari ever cheated. I think Ferrari were very clever. They found a loophole in the rules, and the FIA went, we need to change that. We don't like that. So then they were open. They explained to the FIA how they did it so that, you know, they could stop other teams from doing it in the future. And it was actually, I think, very well handled by the FIA, although on the outskirts of things, I don't think it is viewed in their net. But there is definitely a massive, there is definitely a massive performance deficit in the Ferrari engine this year. In terms of the news, a lot of rumours were going around whether Matteo Binotto would get sacked. And I think the rules that have been put in place are the last thing to see if it can work for Ferrari under Binotto. If not, I think it will. So basically, Ferrari have said that they've gone through a restructuring this week, which basically means that the lead head of departments have been given the powers to run and effectively control their projects in Ferrari that they need. I don't understand why that wouldn't have been the case in the first place. It's basically said something without really saying anything. It's basically going, now there's more responsibility on the heads of departments. And I think it's overall viewed by Matteo Binotto as team principal. And I don't know. I just don't think Matteo is probably the guy to lead. Obviously, he's a passionate Ferrari man. I think he's been with the company for over 20 years. So you can't be with a company for over 20 years and not love Ferrari. But I just don't know if he's the type of bloke that can galvanize and make sure, although these departments have been given extra responsibility to do what they need performance-wise, is he the guy to collate everything together and make sure that the on-track performances are going well? I think Dario goes, how would I fix Ferrari? Ferrari's an enigma in terms of how to fix Ferrari. First of all, they need to find a way of making that engine competitive, because there isn't a loophole that goes out. I don't know. I think they need a whole engine redesign for 2022, if I'm honest with you, because that's the massive deficit at the moment. And in I don't know, every area, they just seem behind everyone. I would now say that drivers, they are behind the teams. I'm not sure Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz is the strongest partnership we'll see going through. I think it's stronger than Alexander Albon and Max Verstappen, but it's not as strong as Hamilton or Bottas. I think they're behind in the aero department because they consistently seem to be getting the aero wrong. They're now behind in the engine department, and they're behind, obviously, in the strategy department. So I think they just need to improve in all areas and at least to get to the leading front. They used to be the leading front in engines, which is obviously what made them win Grand Prix and take pole positions last year. But yeah, at the moment, they don't lead the field in any area. So the first thing what you got to do to fix Ferrari, they've got to lead the area in at least one field in Formula One to make them competitive. To fix Ferrari, they've got to somehow find a way, and they have an extortionate budget. And I know with budget caps coming in, it's going to be difficult now, but with the playing field being leveled out, it shouldn't get to kind of extortionate means on that. It would be interesting. Ferrari also need to stop copying Haas. Go from them. All of the Ferrari 2004 guys work for the FIA and FOM except Rory Byrne and Tom Barzies. Yeah, and I believe Rory Byrne has helped out in some position in the restructuring of this stuff for Ferrari. So it's a real interesting one, and I'm not sure on that front how it's going to be fixed. I'm not sure if this is the solution to the problem. Like I said, they've said something that seems like it should have been happening anyway. Shouldn't all the department heads have the powers to be able to maximize the efficiency of that department, because they know that department inside out and they know how to get that best out of that department in Ferrari? So I don't know. With Mercedes, I can't see that ever being a problem. Toto has always been that kind of gives the people the tools to excel. Obviously, if you watch his Drive to Survive episode, I think that is a fantastic look into how a team principal should run things. And I don't think Binotto does that. And I think you've clearly showed by Binotto saying that all teams have suffered a kind of engine lack of performance or deficit in performance due to the new kind of stipulations being in place by the FIA. And I think Toto Wolff called him out on that BS. Ferrari just royally have cocked up on that front, and Mattia Binotto has so far cocked up the 2020 season in terms of building a competitive car off the track. Also with Ferrari, Sebastian Vettel, I think was speaking about, openly coming to terms with the fact that it was his career mission to emulate Michael Schumacher and win a title with Ferrari. I think he's come to terms with that now, and I think he's ready to close that. And this is like a closing of the chapter with Ferrari. I don't know if he's trying to enjoy his last races with Ferrari, or he's now looking ahead to whether it's with Aston Martin, whether it's with Red Bull, go from there. Hi, the F1 Club. Welcome to the chat. Thanks for coming up. Make sure you check out Joe's videos. He's had a couple of great videos out this week. The most recent one, I think, was on what next for AlphaTauri, I think, or what next for Pierre Gasly and AlphaTauri. That's definitely a good one to go and check out there. So make sure you kind of support Joe as well with the F1 Club. Oh, just drop one as well. Okay, so make sure after we finished here on the F1 Weekly News Show, you go out and check Joe's latest video as well. And I think Steph as well, Steph on F1 has released a video similar as well. But yeah, Sebastian Vettel, it is a real shame, I think, that he hasn't been able to achieve this. But I don't know that now that he's come to terms with it, it now makes him a different animal. And he is more competitive going forward in whichever team that he then progresses onto. Because, well, you know, in his interviews at the tracks, he for me just is looking like a guy that is saying, you know what, I want to be competitive in F1. I still have a lot to offer the sport. And he almost seems a bit more reinvigorated than the Sebastian Vettel that we saw last year at Ferrari, and how it didn't how it didn't work out for him there. So yeah, it's definitely crazy on that. And I suppose probably the last big news stories, unless there is any obviously drop news stories into the comments if you want me to kind of discuss them if I've missed anything. But the Alexander Albon situation, obviously now he has, you know, Christian Horner coming out defending, and you know, you have to take Christian Horner on his word. I know it is difficult with Red Bull because they can say one thing 1 minute and then the next minute, I think they pretty much said the same thing about Gasly before dropping him like a week later. But he was saying that Albon's pace in clear air was actually very good and comparable to Max Verstappen's, and they were happy about his performance and they don't understand the criticism. So I think they realised that yeah, they've kind of dug their own grave with Alexander Albon, and they look like that they want to be seeing this one out with Alex. Although we do know that things can quickly change in Red Bull, and if Alex continues not necessarily matching Max or supporting him as a number 2 driver should do, that come the start of the 2021 season, there might be a different driver in that thing. But at the moment, Christian Horner is being very protective of Alex, saying they're happy with his performances and goes from there. It's good. And then obviously you get the other scale, ex-Red Bull Junior, who's gone on to be very successful within Formula E, the current 2-time back-to-back world champion in Formula, champion in Formula E, because I don't think it's a world championship until next year. They haven't got the classification on that. But yeah, I think Jean-Eric Verne said that if he was Red Bull, he would drop Albon and get Vettel in for the 2021 season. And that's my view on things. I would go with Vettel. If there was any way to get Sebastian Vettel in at Red Bull for the next season, I would do it and go from there. But we'll listen. I think there's some comments in chat talking about it. To be honest, Albon isn't performing as bad as people say. Yes, Styria wasn't great. Hungary wasn't as bad as people say. Qualifying pace wasn't great for the Red Bull, but race pace was strong and Albon did decent. This is my problem. When did what Alexander Albon's level be good enough for Red Bull? My issue is Red Bull is one of the top 2 drives on the grid currently. Because Ferrari have dropped off, there are 4 seats, 2 that are out of this world in Mercedes, and then the 2 below that in Red Bull are the next best. They should be going to the best drivers on the grid, or at least, you know, a very experienced supportive driver. And I think people forget how good they forget how good Daniel Ricciardo was at pushing Max Verstappen. Alex Albon's level doesn't need to be better than Pierre Gasly's. It needs to be getting close to Daniel Ricciardo's level and there. And if it isn't matching that level, then Red Bull, for me, aren't ever going to be competing against Mercedes, because they need 2 drivers pushing on both fronts to be able to take it. And that's why I would, bring in Vettel over that front. Vettel's on spinning mistakes. Red Bull Racing and AlphaTauri test driver Sergio Sette Camara to replace Hartley at Dragon. Yet seen that in Formula E. I think Seb still has it. For me, the driver isn't the problem Ferrari have. You got Alonso, Vettel, Massa. How ain't won a title? Yeah, absolutely, Joe, going on that Ferrari point, Ferrari's problem isn't their drivers. I think Chain Bear did a tweet maybe a few weeks ago. I remember seeing it, and you're like going, if you've had drivers like Fernando Alonso, Kimi Raikkonen, Sebastian Vettel in your car and haven't won a world championship, then maybe the problem is you, not the drivers. And I think that sums it up absolutely perfectly. Ferrari just haven't found a way. In fairness, 2017, 2018, they had it right. But then with Arrivabene, they had everything going in the right direction. And then due to team politics, they sacked him, brought in Binotto, and it's gone downhill since then, because 2019 they had an engine that found a loophole, and now they've been caught with a kind of hands down their pants and having to deal with that situation. And they've basically thrown drivers at this. I would have kept Sebastian Vettel. I had no idea why they decided to drop that. Go from there. But back to Red Bull, I'd like to see from JB, I'd like to see Kvyat have another shot, although he hasn't done too well compared to Gasly, who isn't an amazing driver. He's a decent midfield driver. Gasly, maybe have another chance. My big issue with Kvyat is I think he was performing at the level that was needed for the Red Bull seat. After Hungary, I think he deserved that seat over Albon, and he was ready. He'd had experience in Formula One. He'd gone away and been a test driver for Ferrari, so his development knowledge had improved. He was performing on track. He'd learned from his mistakes. He wasn't the kind of torpedo that everyone spoke about before. And then he got overlooked for a guy who's barely had 6 months in Formula One. And, that's not fault of Alexander Albon. He's been thrown into this situation, and he's just barely kind of trying to keep his head above water. But you have a whole junior team to allow these drivers to develop. Kvyat was the smart decision to make. And I think, when I said it before, it's the fault of Red Bull and Ferrari not finding ways to challenge Mercedes. Mercedes just have their team working in perfect harmony, brilliant drivers, brilliant team principal, fantastic engine. They got everything going absolutely perfect. And yeah, it just, Red Bull seem to be making mistakes, whether it's in the drivers, whether it's with the engine, because I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I've spoken about this. I'll probably do a video at some point going whether leaving Renault for Honda was the right decision. I think it probably was, just because of how the relationship was in the end between those two. But in terms of performance-wise, they then had a deficit to the Mercedes again, because Honda are playing catch-up on Mercedes. And with Ferrari, it's just Ferrari find ways of, spending money and not actually doing very much with it. And yeah, it's crazy. They kind of almost expect to turn up on the grids and be like, we have a car with Ferrari on the side, so we're going to be quick. And obviously it doesn't work like that when you have teams like Mercedes being brilliant there. I think AlphaTauri wanted to keep Kvyat due to his experience to develop the car. Albon was equal on Kvyat in his rookie season. Kvyat also has his chance in Red Bull. Albon hadn't. Well, yeah, no. I get that. I get that, JB. I do. But if we're being honest with you, Toro Rosso isn't there to be competitive in the midfield. It is just there for a place to be competitive enough that, the young drivers can race in the midfield and they can learn some overtaking skills. They can learn how to develop a car, with everything on that front. But if Red Bull needed a driver, Kvyat was the guy there. And I don't think Albon was equal. I think Kvyat was ahead in terms of that. Albon was doing all right and he had some good experiences, but he's still learning his way into the Formula One cars. It's unfair to kind of put a load of pressure, because we're talking about a top seat. It isn't good enough just to be a good driver in Formula One, and Albon isn't in the top 10 drivers, in my opinion anyway, on the grid. He might well be in the future and develop, but at that time he definitely wasn't in that case. But you've also got to have this experience of developing a car. And Albon doesn't have that. He can't have that because he hasn't been in F1 long enough. Kvyat spent an entire year out of the sport doing that. So it just seemed a little bit of a... I don't get the argument of they wanted to see what Albon's like in the car. Well, let him have the year in AlphaTauri. If they wanted to do that, if they wanted a short-term fix, they could have gone Daniel Kvyat and gone from there, and then just stuffed him from the program, because they seem to treat Daniel Kvyat pretty poorly anyway. So I don't think they would have had any issues on that front. How much do we think the Williams power package will impact the car at Silverstone? Good question. I don't actually understand, because it may be enough to get them into Q3 in the hands of George Russell, because George Russell at the moment he's flying. He's having an absolutely brilliant time in qualifying in that car. But I think the issues in the race are deeper than a power thing. I don't know looking at it, but I would assume, because the tyres are so important in this era of F1, is the fact that Williams are struggling to find a way of optimizing performance over a sustained period of time in the tyres. And I don't think that will have, the power upgrade will have any influence. It'll have a small influence, but I don't think it's going to solve their race pace issue. So I wouldn't expect results to maybe necessarily differ too much on that front. But Vips is in Formula Regional now. I think Vips has kind of been done dirty by Red Bull, because he doesn't have enough money, and also Honda want a Japanese driver. Deruvla is probably the best one who's got a shot if he can finish and get enough super license from there. But I don't know. Tsunoda, there's just something missing for him and me. Go to there. If Yuri Vips can get the super license points, I think he was the best out of the Red Bull Juniors. So I don't know why they're gone. But I would say that the Red Bull Junior Academy hasn't been great recently. No, not great. But, you know, Albon and Gasly as the graduates are a little bit different from Kvyat, Ricciardo, Verstappen, in my opinion. Question from Mike. We see Ferrari being very loyal with their contracts, e.g. still giving Irvine cars, as Kubica had the Ferrari seat nailed on. Do you think they'll give him an Alpha seat next year? No. I think Robert Kubica very much now is resigned to development roles within Formula One. He may still want to go on it, but I don't think the performances that he's necessarily showed in FP1 are screaming, get me into it. And especially as Ferrari have the strongest roster of academy drivers at the moment, in terms of, if you were to ask me, you know, who are the best drivers in F2, currently the three would be all Ferrari juniors, and Callum Isler, Robert Schwartzman and Mick Schumacher. I think those are the three best ones currently on performance-wise. Dan Ticktum has definitely done very well, and he's on Williams. I know I've spoken this with Josh a couple of times. Would Red Bull be asking Williams to kind of loan them Dan Ticktum to put in an AlphaTauri seat as a filler? That could be an interesting one on that front, especially if he gets the super license points. We go from there. Zhao, for me, I think is a little bit overrated. I think he's a solid junior, but I don't think he's going to set the world alight in F1. And I think you have to be the only one that I look at that I go, he should definitely be in F1 from early performances. It's definitely Robert Schwartzman. The rest of them, if they didn't make it to F1, I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing in the world. We've got some fantastic young talent in the sport. And if a driver comes into F1 now as a junior, I think they need to be matching the levels of Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc and George Russell, or Lando Norris. Getting to those sort of levels. If they aren't looking, and Zhao, for me, doesn't really stand out as there. They've got to absolutely blitz the junior series, and they've got to really stand out with their performances in race to go, wow, you know, what a... And Zhao, you know, I think it's still, I think I'm believing correct. he hasn't won a single F2 race yet, and he's in his second season F2. He's been unlucky, obviously, in some situations. He probably would have won if he didn't have the engine issue in race 1 in Austria. But I still don't think. I think you've got to stand out to really get that seat in Formula One now, as the competition is so tough. Can't really kick Bottas out right now, though. Can't leave a championship contender with nowhere to go, and he'll still be performing better and better every season. I think Mercedes keeping Bottas is an incredibly smart decision. I think that was obviously in relation to Ewok from Endigo, and I think Russell's proved that he should be in the Mercedes seat. I think Russell has, but if you're Mercedes, why would you break a winning formula? Russell brings in an unknown. He looks great in the Williams. We all think that he will be exceptional, and I have no doubt that he probably will. But Bottas knows the team, and he knows the mechanics, and he knows his role inside out. I think until Lewis Hamilton wins 8 world titles, which it looks very, very good that he's going to do that over the next 2 seasons. Why would they get rid of Valtteri Bottas? It just doesn't make any sense. For fans, we would love to see someone else, even like a Max Verstappen going into that second Mercedes seat and seeing Lewis and Max go hell for leather at each other, because their car's good enough that they could pretty much fight each other and get away with it. Sorry about that. But I just think, what they've got the perfect team harmony with Hamilton and Bottas. It just works so well. And Lewis gets better and better. It's just silly that they would be able to kind of change that up. As much as I love Russell, and as much as I would love to see Russell in that, Bottas is perfect number 2. He creates a great team dynamic and is consistently there to back up Hamilton. Yeah. What Bottas does is what Albon needs to do to keep the Red Bull seat. I think Perez joining Alpha is probably a good thing to talk about as well. Zhao got way more popular from all the sim stuff. He's not set for F2 on fire, to be honest. I think that people need to understand the caliber you actually need to race in F1. I think that's a very good point, Joe. Very good point indeed. I think we get carried away sometimes that if you're in a junior academy, that means that you should make it to F1. No, being in the junior academy is the first step. You've then got to put your performances in on track and set the world alight. And, stuff like what Callum Ilot's doing, and he's even not happy with his performances. Mick Schumacher is performing well. He's been a little bit unlucky, obviously, in certain situations. He could have been better in the championship from where he is. And Robert Schwartzman is definitely the massive standout performer in the first 6 races for me. Only Schwartzman, Schumacher, and Ilott looking close at the moment. Yeah, I would say that. And even with Ilott, I'd say there's probably just something a little bit lacking there as well. And Schumacher has the name, but he also does have the talent as well. Bottas is a good driver. In 2013 Canadian Grand Prix finish up. Yeah, I think Bottas gets a lot of stick unfairly. I think people forget how good a driver Bottas was in the Williams. He was a very good driver in his own right. He now just looks an okay driver next to one of the greatest drivers of all time in Lewis Hamilton. So obviously that's going to, make you not look relatively good in comparison. But on days, Bottas beats him. And on days, Bottas out-qualifies the guy who is statistically the best qualifier of all time. So he can't be a bad one. I know. I can't be disrespecting it. Hi, Josh. How are you? Thanks for joining in on the chat. But yes, we'll go on to Sergio Perez with the Alfa Romeo seat. I'd be gutted to see him go to that Alfa seat. Surely his heart wouldn't be in a development unless he suddenly feels like that. Because, with the Alfa Romeo seat, I don't know if he would view it as if he put some good performances in the Alfa, then an opportunity might open up later down the line, or maybe for 2022, staying in F1, staying in the bubble for that front. But also, it can go the way that Alfa Romeo, that Sauber team, has really been uncompetitive for a very long time now. And it fluctuates in performance so much. And we've seen with Roman Grosjean, who was very, I think, had restored his reputation and pretty highly rated on the grids back in 2015. When he moved to Haas, and with the inconsistency of a good to bad car coming in, it can definitely plummet your reputation. So if Perez went to Alfa Romeo, it could be a graveyard for him. Kimi makes sense because, you know, Kimi is like massively experienced. He's coming to the tail end of his career. If he wants to help out the young drivers, then absolutely go for it. Perez, for me, is still in prime racing years. He could easily walk away from F1 and go to another category and be competitive and maybe have a shot at, you know, winning championships and stuff. And yeah, I just really, I really would hate to see Perez go to a drive like I think it would improve the quality of the grid. Not improve the quality, but if we lose Kimi, it puts another experienced driver in that Alpha seat. But I wouldn't be surprised if Alfa Romeo went double Ferrari juniors if Mick and you know, Schwartzman decide to light it up. I also think the team environment, going on your point, JB, I think Grosjean's reputation went down as he performed really poorly and probably one of probably the only competitive Haas, although after Austria 2018 he was competitive. Yeah, I think it went down after that, and obviously the spin in Spain massively affected things again. It brought, you know, back things of Spa 2012, and it kind of went in circles on Roman Grosjean on that front, and well, quite literally in where he spun the car. I just think with Roman, yeah, he done all right in Haas, but you know, it was a competitive car. But I just think you got to be in the right environment. And would Alpha be the right environment for Perez? I think it's a really big gamble. Joe coming in with a question: what are your thoughts on Haas? I think we saw a performance from Magnussen that will keep him in his seat next year, but Grosjean has to go. I know you're a big fan of Louis Delatraz, and I think he would be well suited for that position. And also, if Haas wanted to kind of go for a junior finally from Ferrari, Eilert or Schumacher probably would be a good bet if Schwartzman does get the Alpha seat. I think Magnussen is one of the most underrated drivers on the grid. I think he's consistently done well in that Haas when it's been fluctuating in performance. Grosjean looks like he's just at the end. I think he's at the stage of his career where he's not in that development mind frame. He wanted to kind of be, at this stage of your career, if you're still in F1, you want to be at the sharp end of the grid, competing for podiums, competing for wins. Grosjean isn't doing that. I don't think his motivation is there. He doesn't look happy with this car at all. Magnussen is kind of more accepting of the kind of building job here. So, yeah, I think Grosjean's gone at the end of the season. It would be a surprise. I'll come back to your question, Kids Love F1. I've seen Binotto out or in. I'll recap on what I've said on that. But, yeah, Magnussen definitely, he's more than earned that seat at Haas. I mean, he would be an outside bet. If I was Red Bull, and like I said, I would get an experienced guy for that seat. Kevin Magnussen is a guy that I would seriously look at because I think that he fits the ethos of Red Bull. Vettel, Perez and Magnussen would be the three drivers that I would be looking at for that Red Bull seat if I was in charge of the team. So, yeah, I think Louis Delatraz would be an interesting one because he would be a junior to come up. But, again, it's difficult because Louis Delatraz hasn't really been with big teams in F2 to kind of boost his performance, and he doesn't have the financial backing that really allows a team to support him to give a serious charge in F2. But has he done enough to kind of really say that guy deserves an F1 seat? I think Haas would probably be more looking at a Daniel Kvyat type of character to partner because they need experienced guys to develop the cars. And if Hulkenberg took a pay cut, I think they would seriously consider Hulkenberg again. It certainly would be interesting on that front. Yeah, it was a really great interview that Joe did with Louis Delatraz. Make sure you go and check that out. It's always interesting to hear from it. Louis really is a great guy on that one. Oh, big call. Magnussen very underrated, better than Hulkenberg in your opinion? Yeah, I think given the machinery, I'd back Magnussen more than Hulkenberg to seal out a deal. Go from there. How about Pietro Fittipaldi? Rundi, no chance. Pietro Fittipaldi is a development driver at max, or a sports car driver. Pietro Fittipaldi is nowhere near good enough for A1. JB's got to head off now. Thanks for the date and discussion. No problem at all. Thanks for joining in the chat as always. I'll give Kids Love for Everyone an answer because I did cover Ferrari earlier in the live stream. Basically, Binotto in or out, it's not working. I don't think everything is down to Mattia Binotto in the decline in performance from 2018 to where they were in 2019 and now where they are in 2020. But as team principal, the buck ultimately rests for you. Are the results and performances over the past couple of seasons good enough for Ferrari? Are the way that Ferrari have handled things good enough for Ferrari with Mattia Binotto in charge? I don't think so. I think Binotto is that guy, unfortunately, who falls into the category of he tries to please too many people and ends up pleasing no one. And he doesn't strike me as the type of guy to be strong and firm in his beliefs and really take that team by the kind of balls and kind of drive it forward. So I'll go from that. So hopefully that answers your question, Kids Love F1. Marchione is really the one who missed. Yeah, I did see your thread on that one. I think Marchione is, and like I said, in answer to your thread on that one, whether Binotto is solely to blame, I think he needs to go regardless, because if he is solely to blame, then it's not working. If it is someone higher up who's making the decisions and Binotto's the scapegoat, then Binotto still needs to go, because it then highlights that there's a problem higher up, and then there is nowhere to hide, and obviously they will be called out on that front. Rest in peace, Sergio Marchione. Yeah, he was brilliant for that. Ferrari need to bring in Joe Pesci into the team. He don't know much about racing, but he can get stuff done. Yeah, it wouldn't be the worst. I think Ferrari is the biggest underachievers in F1 history, and they need very strong leadership. And they need guys who very firmly drive that team forward. It took a very strong character in Michael Schumacher on track to drive the team forward. And also behind the scenes, there were some very good appointments in that Ferrari team that they got like a dream team together of all the best guys that made them like this unstoppable winning machine. But since then and before then with Ferrari, it's always been... they've lacked it since the days of Enzo Ferrari. As much as, you know, Enzo Ferrari is a bit of a polarizing character, that's for say. He certainly was very strong-willed, and he was a man that knew exactly what he wanted. And there's a massive reason why Ferrari went to being one of the most successful car brands in the world of motorsport, is because Enzo Ferrari was driving that force and was ruthless in that decision. And with Mattia Binotto and the Ferrari hierarchy right now, I don't see that, basically. Ferrari equals lazy cash cows, probably a fair point on that one. Is Ferrari's downfall their passion? Do they need more German approach to the sport? I don't think passion's... Yeah, I don't think that's against them. I think they operate as a very different team. They've always had that passion within a team, and they've won things. I mean, at one stage, you know, in sports car racing, they were just absolutely dominant. They would turn up to races and they would just absolutely smash it. I think they lack the character like an Enzo Ferrari at the top, or like Marchione. They lack those guys with strong vision and the kind of desire and ability to execute that vision. That's where I think they're struggling at the moment. That I don't think. Yeah, just looking at it, obviously still going on that Ferrari things. I just don't think passion. I don't think passion is the issue. They might have to do things in a more clinical and effective way, but you can channel and use the passion, which is your strength, to better use than what Ferrari do. But obviously, we've been going for about 50. Oh, very interesting. Very interesting one actually on that. I was about to say, unless we've got any other news stories going from there, Joe is throwing a spanner in the works. Sainz will be the next title challenger for Ferrari. Guys, unreal. Can't wait for him to show his ability in a top car. I'm not a Ferrari fan. Very interesting. I think if you talk to Cranky Yankee, Joe, he might disagree with that opinion on there. I think Sainz is still very much unproven. I think he's had a very good year last year. He hasn't set the world alight this season, although admittedly there have been some pit stops and some things out of his control that hasn't benefited. And obviously he did a monster performance, qualifying third in the wet in that McLaren in the Styrian GP. But I wouldn't think that Sainz, I think Charles Leclerc is still a better bet than Carlos Sainz for the next title challenge. How long do you think until Ferrari win the Constructors and Championships, and with what driver? I'll put it this way. If Ferrari don't win a Constructors or Drivers title in the next decade, I wouldn't be surprised. I think Mercedes will dominate until 2022. And then I think it may be Aston Martin, it may be McLaren having a resurgence. I can't see the way that Ferrari operate as a team winning anything in Formula One anytime soon. That would be my honest opinion on that. But yeah. Yep, like getting handily beaten by Hulkenberg and getting out qualified over the season by a rookie. Oh, jeez. Shots fired from Amaldi over at Kids Love F1, another great channel if you guys want to check out Kids Love F1 as well. But right, guys, I think obviously we've been going for about 50 minutes here. It's been a brilliant discussion, but I think I might go and get some lunch and have some food in there. Obviously, some of the guys had said they dropped videos in there, so make sure you kind of go and support some videos. I'm sure there's some brilliant content to watch over the weekend while obviously there's no racing this weekend, so I hope you guys enjoy that. But unless there's any other questions, I think that was all done on there. Thank you for joining it. I do enjoy making this F1 Weekly News Show a live stream because it's great having great discussions with you in chat. I've really enjoyed it. But that's it from me today, guys. Make a video on McLaren. Actually, we don't have a McLaren video out, but we have someone who drives for McLaren video coming out on Monday. So make sure you kind of check out on that one. But guys, thanks for that. You can obviously catch up the stream. It will be uploaded later if you've jumped in. I've seen Rundy said he only joined for the end. But yeah, if you want to catch up on some of the chats, you can definitely have discussions on that front. But that's it from me today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. So for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.